welcome to the Performers Pod. I am your host, Chelsea Poe. This whole podcast is basically giving a space for porn performers to talk about all the crazy things about our industry, both very positive, negative, real issues, mundane, boring. I kind of want to go into all of it. Today's guest is my dear friend, Mistress Katie Kinako. If you want to support the pod, you can become a monthly member of my Patreon. It's patreon.com/ChelseaPoe. So a little bit about Mistress Kanako. She is a professional dominatrix born and raised in Tokyo, Japan. We talked to her about her decision to bring her experience as a dominatrix to film during the pandemic. And we go into her smash hit film, Tatami. I cannot suggest picking up Tatami enough. It's screened during one of our AVN screenings of East Bay Brats, and I think the moment this podcast is over, you should check out Tatami. It is truly my favorite BDSM film I've seen this year. I hope you enjoy our talk and buy that porn. Thank you so much, Kanako, for joining us for this podcast. This is my second podcast to the Performers Pod with Chelsea Poe, and I'm really excited to talk to you because we've worked together in some capacities a few times. You helped me book screenings in the past. I believe you were actually a cam client at one point on Kink Live. That you're like, I feel like all the cam clients I ever have are like, can I ever meet you? Can I ever be friends with you? And I'm like, there is one person ever who's that happened with. It's totally you. So where are you from? How did you get into the industry?
Well, I am originally from Japan, and I still live in Japan. And I moved to the US for college and graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that period was when I was really able to explore my sexuality and interest in sexuality, as well as, you know, being a porn consumer or someone who finds performers that you really like and you really want to support their work. And I specifically came across you via Tumblr. I think they were like a photo set shot in Courtney, our beloved Courtney Trouble studio.
Courtney's name comes up a lot in this podcast, so definitely a recurring theme.
Well, she's Mama Bear for all of us in a sense. So, and then I found out, you know, you were a performer, but I think you were doing more cam work at that point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
and I've like never been in a cam room. I've never cammed myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, okay, well, there's two ways I can interact with this person. I could, you know, send you like a fan message and be like, oh my God, I'm your fan. Or I could interact with you as a fan / consumer and actually be able to, I mean, I don't want to sound all uppity about it, but financially support someone I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, well, this is really cool because I was actually able to talk to you, which was not something I expected. And so that was my first interaction with you and my first interaction with people who, like, my real interaction with people who are performers.
Wow, I did not know that. I had no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I knew people who were in porn, but I didn't really know them or establish a friendship per se. So I went in and, we had some we were talking, and then we were talking off like the campsite, and then next thing you know, you're in Tokyo and I'm hosting your screening for your film, so the rest is
Yeah,
history.
yeah, that's truly like one of the coolest experiences that we were able to do that in Tokyo, and
Yes,
that was
yes.
a wild screening for so many reasons that we can't go
Hmm.
into. But yeah, so like, what were you like doing before you got into like porn and sex work in general? Like, you were you like really involved with like the punk scene in Tokyo? Were you like, what were your influences that made you even like interested enough to go to a campsite?
Well, I was really interested in human sexuality and gender from a really early age,
Mm-hmm.
and sex work was a part of that as well. So, I had this I just had information you could read out of books, like
Mm-hmm.
even historical things I found interesting. But out of that, I didn't really have the opportunity, especially because of my age, to interact with someone who's in the industry per se. And I was just this weird art kid that went to art school. And, before that, I was just an academic, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a lot of research, got to interview a lot of people and stuff like that. But it was after finishing school and coming back to Tokyo where I initially started off as a translator for rope bondage classes for private lessons. And one of the riggers told me, "Oh, you should really look into being a dominatrix. I can see you being really successful." But at that point, I think I still had some trepidations and, um, to put it really crass, like I didn't have the balls to jump in.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a big step from being a translator on set to being the dom.
right. And, I was always into BDSM in my private life, but at that point, my partner at that point was not very into the idea of me taking it as a profession.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I understand their viewpoint, but at the same time, I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. I would hope that if you're my partner, you would want to support that decision. And so my first step was working at a BDSM/fetish theme bar.
Mm-hmm.
And after a certain point, I thought, I'm kind of tired of just being a dom at a bar. I want to take it more seriously. I want to take it a step further. And at that point, I was single, and I'm one of those very fortunate people who I could, tell my mom, hey, I'm doing this professionally and more or less full time now. So I joined a club, which would equate to a dungeon in the US or any other country.
Mm-hmm.
And then ever since, I've just been working as a professional Dom. And then I never imagined myself to become a content creator, but I befriended Axel Abyss, who is my performance partner in Tokyo. We do live BDSM shows here and there.
That's so cool.
And Yeah, he is a full-time performer now, because back then he was just uploading content for free
Yeah.
because he was like, oh, I didn't think I could do this professionally. And he got some advice that no, you should not be uploading this for free. The sharks are going to be all over this, and you're not getting the compensation that you deserve. So he took it seriously. And I was still doing performances, I was still doing session work, but the pandemic happened and everything just changed. So I had to quickly shift gears and adapt and wonder, how can I translate what I do in sessions and performances and bring it onto uh, like the digital sphere, or something that people can consume even though they're not in an in-person session or audience um, at a show. And I've also
Mm-hmm.
had the privilege of performing at Folsom twice, and that was such a great ego boost, and also it just gave me more confidence that, okay, I can do this. But when it came to translating that into content, I was still a little, unsure or lost, or I just didn't know how I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately enough, I had people like Axel, I had people like Hinako, who co-stars with me in Tatami, who
Which is amazing. And that's
thank you.
exactly the reason why I was immediately like, you need to be one of the first people I interview because
Oh,
of your work in your first like debut film for Trouble Films to Tommy. It's so amazing and it's so hardcore. And
yeah,
I didn't realize it until watching it during the East Bay Brass AVM screenings. And I was just like freaking out. All of us were. And that's your first real production. I mean,
yeah,
I cannot
that was
highly.
literally my first real production. And that's kind of stuff I do normally in a session if somebody's wants me to do stuff that I did to well, I was playing with Yoshi in that
Mhm.
scene. But so through that I was also able to befriend Yoshi, who is probably one of the very few Asian male gay performers that's made a name of him for himself as a
Yoshi
performer.
Kawasaki, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So here I had this veteran, super experienced performer, and he's like, "Oh, we have our protocols and everything, but do what you may, and let's make this happen." So I was very, very fortunate in that sense. So we did that. And since then, of course, I've done stuff that's solo, or I've shot like short clips and stuff during in-person sessions, and they're
Mhm.
all on my OnlyFans. But yeah, that's really my path into becoming a performer slash content creator.
Do you think if the pandemic didn't happen, do you think you would be doing porn right now?
Honestly, I don't know, because I have a sneaky feeling that I think that the last time I was in the West Coast hanging out with you and Courtney, we were saying, oh, next time we meet, we should, make a film. And I was like, yes, I would love that. And then the pandemic happened. So, of course, no Folsom, no travel,
Yeah.
and that didn't happen. But I think that if the pandemic wasn't a thing or it didn't happen, I may have been a performer in that way. But if I were in Japan and the pandemic wasn't a thing, I have my doubts about being a performer or being any sort of digital content creator, simply because it wasn't something that I had in mind or I had any experience in.
Is there a moment that so far from your performing that really made you realize that this is probably going to be something more than just like a scene or two in something kind of more substantial?
Well, definitely with the feedback I got from Tatami, for me, that's something I do normally.
Yeah.
So, I was like, people might like it, people might hate it. Um, and then Axel, when he put it up on his website, he had a mixed bag of reviews because his audience is predominantly gay men.
Yeah.
And like, we don't want to see women in a scene. And then, but he also got positive reviews about this was not something I would have expected for you to produce. It's so queer. It's hardcore.
It's
We've
very
never
both
seen
very queer
anything
and
like
hardcore.
that. Yes,
Like,
yes. So, yeah, and then because of that, I was like, maybe I could take things even further. And I just love, playing with people that I haven't played with or people who've, um, you know, just I have the right chemistry with. So Yoshi and I shot another scene together that's coming up soon, but I think that as long as I'm 100% invested in it and I believe in the project and I have someone to perform with, I think it could be something that's a long-term thing that happens,
mhm.
especially because I also am lucky enough to know people who can record, edit my live performances, and those are really like in the moment, like there's no cut, stop, can you move this way, move that way. It's more of like the camera work and editing that does everything.
Yeah,
So
where you're shooting really organically, so it's just like basically
exactly.
the scene happening.
Mm-hmm.
I, yeah, I
So
really admire like what you're saying is it sounds like you're really shooting what you're actually doing in your like daily life essentially.
right, right,
Like
right.
I feel like that just really comes across to people in like forums where like if they see you enjoying what you do and you just being natural because it's what you do, I feel like it
Mm-hmm.
really comes across.
Yeah, yeah, and then that's what I really aim to do when I'm producing content. I don't want to force myself to do something, or if I feel uncomfortable about something, I know that that's just gonna come out or be super obvious for the viewer. So in that sense, I've really stuck to what I love and what I'm used to and what I believe in. So I think that's always been the upside for me when I'm producing stuff.
It's so cool. What usually goes into preparing for a scene for you? Like how do you get prepared to get into that headspace? Because you do some fairly extreme stuff in the scenes, like in Tatami, you're like fisting an asshole and then like um making a boy piss from fisting his asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And like all like the sadistic stuff on top of rope bondage and like all this stuff that
Mm-hmm.
even for someone who's like a really big like BDSM slut myself, it's
Mm.
almost like, oh my god, that's so wild and out there. And I really love it. And I love that I can see porn that does that to me. But like, how do you prepare for that?
Well, I have to credit Yoshi on the pissing because we had like a brief, run through of where we shot in this old house that was going to be torn down. So we did a short run through of, okay, we're going to shoot here. This is where we should set everything up. This is where we're going to block ourselves. And then while doing that, Yoshi is like, says super he's like almost apologizing to me, like, I pee when I'm fisted and it feels really good, so I'm really sorry if I get piss on you. So I was like, no worries, babe, I've like experienced way worse, it's all good. And almost it's not even when the camera starts rolling, it's more like once I'm playing, my headspace is already in there. So knowing that he pisses a lot when he's in like a very ecstatic headspace, I was just almost super determined to make him piss as much as he could in that weird sense. So I was like, I saw some trickling out and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna take this to the like whole other level, because obviously I want him to enjoy the whole play aspect of it, and then
Of course.
for people to see, okay, yeah, this is what some people experience, or what happens to some people when they're playing. So that was very organic, and in that sense I think when I shoot, when I perform, everything's very organic. Even when I do live performances, I don't really practice at all. I just do like a run through of the music, and I give notes or pointers to whoever's subbing for me. I'm probably going to be doing this, this, and this, and this to you. And if you have any problems, just give me hand signals, whatever. I can stop, I can untie you. I'll do whatever that has to be done. So that's pretty much how I get into it and prepare.
I love that there's a space with this podcast so I can talk about this stuff with performers. Both and one, like the consent thing you were talking about, how that stuff happens even during really intense scenes where there's this communication. And obviously a way to get out is you're way over your head, you're in danger, all that stuff. But you have that like true, like, I feel like some performers have this like porn killer mindset where it's like, oh, they said they do this when they come, so I'm going to make them do that as much as possible and go into the scene with that mindset.
Yeah, I think it was also that comes from me being a professional dom, because when you're in a session, you have a limited time to make things happen, and for your sub or client to be able to experience what you can offer. So when Yoshi told me that, I was thinking to myself, that was our first time playing with each other, so I wanted him to leave having fun. And I'm just, in that mindset of like, okay, I'm gonna not push the limits. Maybe I wouldn't say I was trying to push the limits, but I want to see how far I can take it, and I want to see how far I could take him to that spot that really blanks out his head and he's just consumed in what we're doing together, as well as our other guest stars and just make that whole field happen all at once.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's what I love about BDSM so much, because in these scenes,
Mm-hmm.
you're obviously working with a coworker who you assign all the stuff to, but like you're also both getting in each other's heads in the middle of this, and you're both having to like react to each other and have all that. And I think that's like one of the things that keeps bringing you back to BDSM for, because obviously there's really probably extreme connections, even on probably mainstream sets in like LA and stuff that happen. And, you know, during a middle of a scene, I'm sure it gets very passionate, and it's that same like working with each other's bodies. But I feel like BDSM, there's just such a deep thing to it, because both top space and subspace exist. It's the real thing you get in a scene, even though, you know, you're performing in a film. It's not quote unquote real, but it also kind of is.
Right, and I think that for certain people or certain subs I've interacted with, for Yoshi and Axel, for example, I feel like they can really get into their subspace and I can really get into my top space. Whereas, um, you know, sometimes in sessions that unfortunately doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not either party's fault. It just didn't happen. It might not have, you know, something might have happened to that person that day, or someone's nervous. And I mean, I think the same goes for when you're shooting for a scene, but I think with working with people I know and people who I've been able to establish a personal connection with, the likelihood of them being able to get into that mind space and for me to be in the best of that mind space for me is way the likelihood's way higher for sure.
Yeah, I'm really happy we could get into that. This is what I really like about just being able to have conversations with performers, because I feel like we usually don't have time to talk about performing and all the stuff that goes with it. That's just like not really a thing that's vocalized, because I feel like so much in mainstream press is so sensationalized how they want to talk about porn, where they're like, oh, you're having anonymous sex with these people you just met, and it's like,
Right,
it's not really
right,
that.
right.
Even if you're just meeting someone on set, it's not a hookup kind of vibe
Right,
to it. It's like, okay, we're
right.
working, we have this common end goal, and we're both gonna perform with each other's bodies essentially, and you know,
Exactly,
make it be a
exactly.
thing. Do you
And
have
I'm
a
like, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And also, it's like, yeah, you haven't seen the times that we just like hang out, well, pre-corona at events together, or we go out to dinners together, and there's nothing sexual about that because we're good friends. But as performers, that friendship probably really helps because we just have that personal connection. And I think even with, you know, someone you're meeting for the first time, there may be like a right chemistry or like something clicking that
mm-hmm.
you're able to make that happen. So yeah, I think I agree with you. The perception is it's like, oh, it's like a random hookup. And oh no, it's a very planned, very, you know, we're all about consent and safety, especially with what we do. So, you know, we take all the precautions, but in the end, sometimes we end up with something that's way more hardcore than we expected. And with the next scene I shot with Yoshi, which is just one-on-one,
Mm-hmm.
it was just gonna be like a humiliation scene, but we managed to bring out a whole bunch of tricks and things that I like to do personally. And then before I knew it, like Yoshi was really into it as well. So it all panned out. So I'm excited for that to get out to the world as well.
Yeah, I feel like so much of porn, it almost reminds me of like UFC or boxing in a way, where you know who you're gonna have sex with a month in advance. And like you're following each other on social media and stuff. It feels like that. It's like it's I feel like UFC stuff is like it is two guys fighting, but it's also like they plan this for 2 months together and they're both a part of this. It feels a little bit like that where you have this like really drawn out thing where you have on your calendar, you're like, I'm gonna have sex with this person or dominate this person or whatever else. Where in a lot of ways, like no one has hookups that are like that. Like I feel like most people don't have a plan to have sex with someone 2-3 months in advance.
Right.
Other than important. Yeah.
Right.
Do you have like a dream scene that you want to shoot?
Well, I think that I've yet to shoot anything that's only with women, and especially after being able to be a part of the screening of East Bay Brats, I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. It's like all these like beautiful people getting together, like, and for me that's pretty hardcore. I think especially when I'm talking about mainstream market wise, most girl on girl stuff is made for the male gaze, so
yeah,
it's not really hardcore unless it's under a specific hardcore label that's producing that scene. So I would love to shoot something super hardcore that's with other women who are, open to performing with me. That's, that might sound like a little not that huge of an idea, but I would be very interested to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure you're gonna get the opportunity to. I think after like people see what you've made already, I think a lot of girls are gonna be like, okay, I'm down for that. Whatever you're
like taking application, ready to fill out applications here.
Do you feel like you have more opportunities in Japan, porn-wise, or in the United States, or does it feel kind of a little bit of both?
I think a little bit of both. Just because I have the privilege of knowing people like you and Courtney who are very understanding and open and appreciate the stuff that I want to create. And I'm also privileged here to know filmmakers and performers such as Axel, Yoshi, and Hinako who create superb work on their own time by themselves. So, and I mean, I don't want to say I have the connections, but I very much do.
You do, though. You can say that if it's true.
Yes, it's like, I know the people, and I think the great thing that I have is that I have like a personal connection to all of you guys, rather than just like a business based, oh, I want to film this, can you help me kind of thing going on. So in that sense, I'm very lucky in both countries, and it's just a matter of legality that might get in the way in either country, but I mean, as long as I'm given the opportunity, I'm open and happy and excited to perform, produce in anywhere really. So
I think if you got your stuff into like the Berlin Foreign Film Festival, I think Berlin would really like what you're doing.
I hope they do too.
Yeah, I think they would definitely like that. I feel like in a lot of ways Berlin and Tokyo's fetish vibe is a little bit
Uh-huh.
of the same, where it's just like very, very kind of everywhere and very hardcore, just kind of out of
Mhm.
from the jump. Um,
Right.
do you have a favorite place to shoot? Like, do you like shooting more in Tokyo? Do you like shooting more in LA? Do you like the Bay?
So when it comes to video or scenes, I've never really shot in the States minus like the short scene I did with Courtney
Oh
at
yeah.
her place. So um I'd love to have more experience shooting in the US. Especially after seeing what was pulled off in East Bay Brats 3, I was like, wait, I've had a session in there.
Oh yeah.
Why does that
It's
space look so huge and so, beautiful? I don't remember it being like that. I mean, given it is a very pretty space, I was like, I didn't see it in that light, and how whatever magic you all pulled, I'm like, I want to shoot in a space like that. So,
yeah.
yeah.
It's a really great dungeon in the East Bay. I Yeah, very affordable. They really want
Hmm.
people to work there and make stuff there, which is really cool because I feel
Right.
like so many dungeons you go into, you're like the first person shooting anything there. It's just like, oh, this is just session stuff for everyone else. And then you're like
Hmm.
bringing in camera equipment and they're like, oh, what is this? Like I've
Right,
had that
right,
a lot
right.
of experiences in the Bay with that, but yeah, I absolutely love Blackthorn. I'm really excited to get back there, and yeah, it's I think just a really feasible thing when you can get a few sex workers together and you can really cut down overhead. That you can just
Hmm.
consistently make something that you all really want to do and all be on the same page. It's
Hmm.
honestly one of the
Yeah.
things I'm most proud of, just because it's like we just did it on our own, as opposed to like waiting for a studio to be
Right.
like, we're
Right.
gonna hire you to make a lesbian movie, and it has to be for men, and it can't have fat people in it, or it can't have trans people. And I feel
Hmm.
like we were just like, fuck it, we're gonna do it.
Right. And I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm fetishizing trans performers, but I haven't had the opportunity to perform with trans performers either. So that would be like another experience I would love to have. Especially, me being a queer person, I've had relationships with trans people, and I've played with trans people,
Mhm.
and I would love to, like I said, translate what I actually do in my private life or my professional life onto into a scene. So, that would be another thing I would love to do. Um, and I
So,
feel like with performers, a lot of performers here that are booked with agencies and stuff like that, it's very hard for them to create indie content or just create content, by yourself. So it's a little harder for me to find talent that way.
yeah, can you speak
So,
to that a bit? Like, how does the porn agency system work in Japan? Like, is most models, from my understanding, are represented by agencies, right?
yes, yes, for the most part, um, it's agencies, and then usually there's labels that work closely with the
Mm-hmm.
agencies, and then they have the whole management and everything, line everything up for everyone. And for me, I did like my first feature with a sub, but that was more the production companies more concentrated on BDSM content, so it was more of them wanting to bring real professional DOMs. And it was cool because they're like, oh, we just need you to write the scenes down and write what you're going to be doing so we can operate our cameras accordingly.
Wow.
So that was a great process. But other than that, if it's mainstream stuff, I don't even know how I'd wrap my head around it, just because of the whole having to deal with agencies, having to deal with labels and distributors and all that, which I feel like is a little bit similar to how porn is produced in the US when it comes to
In
mainstream.
LA, I think specifically.
Yeah.
I feel like just what it feels like in the United States is it feels like agencies exist, but there's only like 4 or 5 of them. From my understanding, they're all in LA, and then these performers have their careers really restricted, where you can only work with certain people, and then you can't do content trade, or if you do content trade, you can't do with certain types of people and stuff.
Right.
So it sounds like it's almost that, but more concentrated in Japanese porn.
Yeah, I think yeah, it might be. It's just very, if you want your porn to be mainstream, it's basically everything's out of your hands here. And I think that's very much so in the US as well. So if I were to proceed as a performer or a producer of content, I'd rather stay in the indie model where I could have everything under my control, make content for trade. And, I like having control of what I produce and having it distributed by people that I think are a great match. And that's another reason why I knew that if I wanted to bring Tatami out on the next level, I would wanted to approach Trouble Films, because I'm like, where else would I take this?
Yeah, I feel like the really good thing Trouble Films has been able to do is really just take performers who are making stuff on their own and have like full-fledged ideas for films, and we really, I feel like, have had a place to have a platform with it and be like, okay, you can have your movie up here, it's queer as hell, it's really hardcore. I also feel like one of the major differences between porn in the US and porn in Japan is I feel like there's a lot more focus on BDSM in Japanese porn.
Yeah, I think there's a huge market for BDSM porn here, and some of it is like you watch it and it's like, this is not BDSM kind of porn versus like the real like hardcore stuff. And my rope teacher, he does a lot of tying for that kind of porn where it's super hardcore. And in the earlier days, he'd actually appear in them because they just didn't or couldn't find actors that could pull it off. But nowadays, he's just like, oh yeah, I do the tying, and I'll just like sit back and be like the guy in charge, making sure everything's safe. And the actor would come in and act as if he did everything and torture or play with the other performer. So it's very interesting to see like the types of BDSM and hardcore content that comes out of here. for sure.
Yeah, I feel like in the United States we have maybe 4 companies that make BDSM, and like 2 of them are only kind of BDSM.
Uh-huh.
So I definitely feel like it's just like there and Germany, it's just like there's so much actual BDSM that just like
Mm-hmm.
going there, I'm just like mind blown just seeing like you took me to a porn store in Tokyo and it's just like racks and racks of BDSM. I feel like
Right,
even
right.
like the most kinky sex shop in like the United States, like I would say probably the kinkiest chain is probably the Pleasure Chest. They have like maybe 12 DVDs.
Right.
It's just so different.
Yeah, that
So
place is special, but yeah, I mean, the fact that there's a place like that in our country.
yeah,
And of course, there's always the internet too, because, they can sell stuff on the internet. So,
um,
yeah, I get what you're saying.
what are some of your weirdest industry experiences, good, bad, or otherwise? Which it could go back to just like being a dom too. I feel like because I feel like you've always had some sort of performative aspect to your.
Right, right. Um, I think one of my weirdest experiences is that when I was starting off professionally, I was like, oh, I don't want to be a performer. That's not what I'm interested in, you know? But then when I was put in positions where I had to do performances, when I worked in the BDSM bar, for example, when we had our anniversary event, all the staff had to perform and do a little performance together. And I was supposed to tie this girl, but the stagehand um, removed the rope from the stage, thinking that someone just left it there by mistake. So I was like, fuck. Like, what am I gonna do? There, I have like 5 minutes to fill, and all I have is my single tail. So I had to like whisper in her ear and like pretend to be all like sexy about it and be like, somebody like got rid of the rope. I have to like use my single tail instead. And she's like, just go with it. And then I like pulled it off somehow. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, that was so embarrassing. But on the way out, everyone was like, oh, you did such a great job. Like, that was such a good, like, scene, or like, da 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 da. And I'm like, and there was something really cathartic about that, too. And I'm like, huh, I guess like being a theater kid in high school really pulled off.
It truly does. I took theater for a year in high school, and it helps me so much now. Where it's just
Mhm,
like, oh, I know how
mhm.
to memorize lines and just like improvise and take up
Right,
time.
exactly,
It's so
exactly.
helpful.
I mean,
Uh,
in my context, where I think, even for you, like if it's BDSM, of course you need that consent. So I'm like, consent in front of the audience and make it look real sexy. So
yeah,
that was like a really weird experience for me, because usually when I'm like talking about consent, I want to do it where we're both not in subspace, top space, and like even with sessions, I usually start with sitting down and asking about, okay, what are you okay with? What do you absolutely hate while you're playing? Stuff like that. But I have this girl tied up and like half suspended, and I'm like, I need your consent right now. And thankfully, like, she was experienced too, so she was like, do what you need to do. So
that's
I got
so rad. Okay. Do you have anyone weird or anything weird in your DMs? from the past. I'm really anxious for you because I feel like you are one to sometimes post the people that send you shit. So what do you is there anyone who would be like shocking that was in your DMs or anything just generally really weird that's remarkable?
Oh my God. I've gotten a lot of marriage proposals.
Yeah.
But they're all like, I read them and they're like, I will be your full-time live-in sub, but I wouldn't need a visa, so please marry me. And I'm
Oh my.
like, really, dude? Like, I do not need, first of all, I don't like people touching my laundry.
Really?
It's like, I can do my own laundry. I can clean my own house if I choose to. So you can back off.
Wow.
But one amazing thing that happened to me was one time, I was watching this podcast called Two Bears, One Cave, and
Okay.
it features Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer.
Okay, yeah,
They're
I
like
know both of them. Yeah.
my favorite comedians, one of or two of some of my very favorite comedians. And Bert was going on about how he started. He got an on OnlyFans account. He's like, yeah, I just like follow people and like look at people's content and learn new things, or like da da da. And I jokingly thinking, there's no way no one's gonna interact to this. And I like, tweeted something like, I will offer Bert Kreischer a free lifetime subscription to my OnlyFans. And then he replied within hours and was like, I will accept only for research purposes.
Oh my god, that's so
I
funny.
was like, what? But he hasn't reclaimed it yet, so I'm like, yeah, I'm waiting. Come on, dude.
I mean, at least you have the tweets that you can be like, this
Right,
happened.
right. I'm like, I need this printed and hung somewhere in my house.
What are some things that you still want to accomplish in your career? Because your career is fairly young. I mean, you're technically someone who got into porn via the pandemic, which I feel
Right,
like
right,
I've
right.
been talking to so many people who want to start their porn career
Mhm.
after the pandemic now, but I feel like, yeah, you are almost in the opposite situation. What are some
Right.
things you still want to accomplish?
Well, definitely um shoot internationally. That would be one thing. Um and really maybe even shoot with people who I've, kind of not had the opportunity to know personally beforehand, and see how that pans out, and testing my skills. Um Not only as a performer but as a dom, to see how I can facilitate a scene, and hopefully being able to produce something that's uh, enjoyable for the audience to consume out of that, and just expanding the kind of content I create would be a huge thing for me, because my goal is, I really want to create things that align with my vision and my sexual preferences or interests and whatnot, but then also have a project thrown at me and be asked to be a part of something, and you know being a collaborator but also being someone who's a contributor, rather than holding the reins of the project. So yeah, I would love to have that experience of, just not, to put it blunt, just being told what to do and being given a premise and being able to pull that off, I think would be something I would love to achieve.
That's really cool. It sounds like that you both want, to creatively expand more on your own, but also find people that are true people you can collaborate with and really bring something in creatively.
Right. And of course, I would not want to work with someone who's, perspective towards BDSM or gender or sexuality that I don't agree with or I find problematic personally. But if it's outside of that, and if I could really empathize and align myself with their vision, I would love to be brought onto a scene by them.
It's really cool. If you could magically change one thing in porn overnight, just tomorrow, it's different, what would it be? It could be big, it could be small. What would you like it change to be?
I think that, well, first of all, I just want all the censorship laws in Japan to be over with. But also, I guess, overall, so it might not be like specific to porn, but I just want the pandemic to magically disappear so I can travel to shoot and create more content. That would be like my one crazy fantasy if I were to name one.
I mean, that's the one. Are there a lot of vaccinations happening over there at this point?
It's still frontline workers only, so I'm waiting for things to turn around, and hopefully by the end of this year I'll be be able to visit everyone in the Bay. Like, I miss all of you guys, and
Likewise.
I mean, I miss my friends and I miss my family, so I'm just hoping that even travel period to become an option.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're really starting to roll it out. I have my vaccination, I think, in 12 hours.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so excited, also nervous about just returning to life. I feel like we've all become in such a bubble, and I feel like now that we're all going back into the world, it's a little bit scary, but
right.
You definitely haven't missed much not being in the Bay in the last year. But, yeah,
that's what I've been told.
Yeah, I think those are two good wishes. I mean, removing porn censorship completely. Obviously, Japan has very high censorship, but it can be everywhere. I would be down with that wish as well, and then for the pandemic to be over. But I had so much fun talking to you for this podcast. Thank you so much for coming on it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's like good to see you and be able to have this conversation.
Likewise.